My name is Alice Collins, 27, Seattle. I learned early that some houses are built from applause and others from silence, and if you grow up in the second kind, you teach yourself how to breathe between the claps. The night it all crystallized, candles shivered against crystal glass, and a chandelier hummed like a low electric truth. My mother raised her flute, pearls catching light as if they were part of her skin. 80,000 for Leah's studies in Paris, she said. The way a headmaster announces a prize they always knew would be won by one particular student. Forks paused midair. A warm ripple of approval moved around the table like steam. I was careful. I waited for the laughter to settle, for the camera phones to dim. I leaned forward. What about me? The question came out small, the kind that doesn't want to trouble anyone. She didn't look up. You don't deserve any help, Alice? Not loud, just precise, a scalpel laid on the table. Even Leah's smile folded in on itself. There are moments that take a photograph of you, how your fingers stop inches from the plate, how your breath forgets itself, how the room collects around one sentence like dust around a sunbeam. Dad refilled his wine. We put money where it brings returns, he said, voice level, managerial. You made your own choices. Between them, a ledger opened with my name in the margin. Textbook, I thought. Results and returns, investment and image, love dressed like economics. I nodded like a student memorizing a definition and let the moment burn into memory. The chandelier's hum, the perfume that smelled like bruised roses and overcooked meat, the polished silver singing under knives. If this was our family's math, then I finally understood the equation written under my breath since childhood. Leah equals light. I equal silence. I didn't argue. I didn't explain that I was 2,000 short on my dorm deposit, that a semester's gap can become a lifetime's glitch. I didn't say I'd pay it back, though I had said as much moments earlier. I swallowed the stone they called investment, and it settled with a hard, useful weight. When I stood to leave, my chair legs screeched across the floor, louder than anything I could have said. Outside, rain had just begun, Seattle tapping its steady metronome on the windshield, counting out the seconds between who I'd been and who I would have to become. By the time I reached my apartment, the messages were already marching in. Don't be dramatic. You'll regret this. Families have priorities. I turned the screen face down and watched the dark glass reflect me back. A faint outline that would have to be enough. I grew up in the quiet parts of other people's spotlight. When Leah joined debate, our mother called it leadership. When I joined robotics, she called it a hobby, something you keep in a drawer. Leah's laptop was newer, her room bigger, her calendar a country map where every day had a parade. I edited her essays, fixed her phone, ran errands in rain that soaked my socks and made the city smell like pennies. Mom said I was helpful. Dad said I was practical. Words that felt like aprons, not names. On my 10th birthday, I got a bus pass and a lecture about independence. The driver, Henry, would tip his cap in the mornings. The seat beside me stayed empty in a way that taught you more than any classroom did. I won a local coding competition once. I printed the certificate myself because the email said, "Congratulations," but no one printed congratulations for you. You had to fetch them, cut them clean, line them up. Dad squinted under the sprinkler's hiss and said, "Well, that's a start." Mom never asked what the project was. That same night, Leah posted about her Paris interview, and the family group chat turned into a stadium. My phone died under the notifications for a game I wasn't invited to. At graduation, my name echoed in an auditorium that somehow made every sound thinner. They sat front row, perfect smiles, pastel outfits. No one stood. I held my diploma like proof, not pride. This is not an indictment, it's a record. When people leave holes, data fills them. By high school, I'd built a little app that tracked bus routes for students without cars. The local paper called it clever. Mom called it time I could have spent networking. She clipped the article because our last name was printed under the title, because sometimes you frame a photo not for the person in it, but for the wallpaper it matches. Back at the apartment after the Paris dinner, I made coffee, black and mean, and opened my laptop. New folder, life plan. Inside, savings, projects, a document named routes. I didn't know what it would become, only that it would run better if no one else had permissions. The heater clicked every 10 minutes. The walls smelled like someone else's burnt toast. The rain kept the tempo. By day, I brewed coffee for strangers and put out small fires in the cafe Wi-Fi. By night, I wrote code under a tired yellow lamp that flickered like it was skeptical of me, and then slowly began to believe. I don't want to pretend I was brave. I was precise. I tracked hours like they were receipts, pennies like they were seeds. If I took the bus, I wrote down the time it shaved off from a walk. If I fixed a router, I noted the crash pattern. If a manager said, "We'll see," I recorded the date the "we" divided. Document everything, I told myself, like the world was a machine you could maintain if you kept the right log. Families are machines too, in their way. Some run on applause, some run on compliance. Mine ran on returns. I chose to run on evidence. By the end of that week, I had deleted the family contacts from my phone. Not in anger. Anger is loud and spends too much. Deletion is quiet. It creates space. I slept with my laptop open on the desk like a lighthouse with a modest bulb. In the morning, I woke to a small email from a tiny logistics firm that had noticed the code I'd posted to a form under no name at all. "Can you consult on route planning?" it asked. The words were simple. They were also a door. You learn to recognize doors when you grow up around gates. To say I left my family would be the wrong verb. You don't leave a room you were never really in. You step outside, find air that doesn't require you to hold your breath. The next time I saw Leah's name, it would be on a call I didn't expect. Late morning sun, turning my living room floor into gold bars. But that's later. For now, understand this. I didn't become another person after that dinner. I became the same person with better accounting. I kept the green bus pass from my 18th birthday, thumb-worn and creased. I pinned it above my desk between the coding certificate no one cared about and a blank index card where I would write something I could live inside. I stared at that card for a long time. Rain on the window, Henry's old wave flickering up from some bottom drawer of memory, the quiet click of the heater trying to keep up. Then I wrote 4 words: neat, small, unglamorous, broken roots, better paths. I capped the pen, I closed the laptop, I breathed. If you're waiting for the dramatic speech, I don't have one. I had a chair scraping, a car door closing, a folder sinking, a phone number disappearing. A life is built in smaller sounds than the movies tell you. Mine would be built from them on purpose. From now on, if love arrived as a balance sheet, I would count differently. And if no one stood when my name was called, I would build a room where names didn't have to be called to matter. The city exhaled. The rain turned from tapping to the soft run-on sentence that Seattle writes across every window. In that language, I understood something new. Silence is not absence when you choose it. It can be scaffold. It can be floor. It can be the blueprint you draw when permission is too expensive. I set an alarm for 5 a.m. I made a list so plain it almost glowed. Then I went to sleep, the bus pass watching over me like the smallest, truest flag. Before a person learns calculus, they learn counting. Who gets counted and who does the counting? In our house, Leah was always the one, tallied at the end of the night. The one whose name pooled into a bright sum. I learned to be the scribe, quiet, precise, invisible if I did it right. Childhood wasn't cruel in the dramatic way. It was polite, perfumed, and perfectly arranged, like a showroom where every chair is just slightly too far from the table to sit down. On Saturday mornings, our mother would float down the hall with a to-do list framed as love. Help Leah with her practice, she'd sing, leaning into Leah's door, as if the room's air belonged to her. Alice, could you print those debate articles and fix her charger? And maybe wipe her camera lens. The smudges dull the image. The word image was something she polished. It lived in our silverware, in the way she fussed with the hem of Leah's blazer, in the way she never quite looked at the stain on my cuff from a soldering iron. When Leah joined debate, our mother said leadership in a tone that turned the syllables into a halo. When I joined robotics, she said hobby, as if I'd taken up stamp collecting in a world where judges award crowns for speeches. My room smelled like flux and warm plastic. Hers smelled like hairspray and the expensive paper of event programs. We were two lab sections of the same family experiment. Measure the returns on applause versus the returns on quiet fixes, then publish the findings every holiday in the form of a speech over dessert. The tally continued in small ways. Leah's laptop was always newer, the kind that opens like a mirror and hums its own confidence. Mine had keys that stuck on humid days, the spacebar requiring a firm thumb like a stubborn door. The bigger room with better light faced east, so Leah's mornings glowed. Mine faced the driveway, where the garbage truck announced itself at 6:12 a.m. every Tuesday. If I edited her essay, the grade came back with a teacher's looping praise and a magnet spot on the fridge. If I built something that worked, a line-following robot that didn't bump into chair legs, Mom pursed her lips and asked when I'd get out and meet people. The euphemism for networking in our house was sunlight. Everything desirable supposedly happened inside it. Still, I loved the way a board comes alive when you close a circuit. Loved the soft tick of a relay engaging, the tiny blink of a status LED that says, yes, this speaks. I learned to listen to those ticks more than to the cheers from the auditorium. Henry taught me to listen too. The bus driver in a city like ours becomes a daily witness, a quiet archivist of public lives. He knew my stops by month 2 and tipped his cap just slightly when the rain came hard and my hair plastered to my forehead. Seats are warmer in the back, he'd call, as if that were a kind of blessing. The last row felt like a study carol rolling on wheels. and I learned the rhythm of the lines through Capitol Hill, how the city inhales and exhales across a weekday. In a nation where 1 in 5 students commute longer than 30 minutes to school, efficiency is an unglamorous form of mercy. I didn't know then that I was training for my life's work, the choreography of motion, the moral math of not wasting anyone's time. I won a local coding competition sophomore year. Printed the certificate myself on the library color printer that always had a warning taped to its side about paper jams. The email said first place and the template said border laurels, but triumph doesn't knock. It asks you to staple it in a straight line on your own wall. I brought it to Dad while he crouched by the sprinkler head, a bead of water trembling on the nozzle like a thought he might or might not have. He squinted, nodded once, and said, "Well, that's a start." Starts in our family were a way to keep you from arriving. That same night, Leah posted a photo in a cream blazer outside the French Alliance office. Paris interview, wish me luck. Our family group chat, silent through my last 3 report cards, erupted. Hearts, balloons, our aunt's keyboard confetti, our grandmother's, "You were always meant for more, sweetheart." In a democratic forum, attention is currency. In a family forum, it's a regime. My phone battery bled out under the weight of their celebration. Somewhere between the 4th and 5th screen of messages, Mom texted me, "Can you iron the blue blouse for tomorrow?" I stared at the glowing rectangle and felt something rearrange. 2 wires crossing in a way that stops one circuit and powers another. High school gave me one gift our house couldn't gum up: time alone after dark. I would lay out breadboards, tuck my hair behind my ears, and set the old desk lamp at an angle that made a cone of concentration. Outside, the rain wrote in its long cursive on the window. Inside, I started writing something back. The bus route app began as a selfish desire to shave 10 minutes off my own commute, then widened into a little tool for kids who had to choose between getting to school on time and finishing breakfast. The local paper's community page called it a clever idea in a column that sat between a softball league result and an ad for a weekend rummage sale. Mom clipped it and slid the rectangle into a drawer, the family archive, because our last name looked nice in print. She never asked me what problem it solved. In households like ours, form outshines function until the roof leaks. Then function is expected to arrive silently and mop up. Graduation taught me theatrical silence. When my name, first name, then last, bounced off the rafters, I stood, crossed the stage, and collected the heavy, embossed proof that I had completed the contract. In the front row, my parents smiled, pastel and camera ready. No one stood. 1,000 bodies in one room, and somehow the math added to 0. I walked back to my seat, gripping the folder as if paper could be ballast. Across the aisle, Leah cheered for a friend with a kind of easy generosity I loved in her, in spite of everything, because none of this was her fault. She played the role handed to her, the firstborn favorite in a meritocracy calibrated by someone else's mirror. That night, Mom wrapped both of us in an embrace scented with her favorite perfume, a smell I would later associate with announcements. "I'm so proud of both my girls," she said into my hair, then tipped her chin toward Leah. "Especially you, sweetheart." I smiled because a camera was pointed our way. because we had relatives who would read the image as a caption more than any syllable. Later, in my room, I pinned the bus pass above the desk and slid the coding certificate underneath it. A private gallery of unremarkable victories. The rain tapped, then drummed, then held a steady beat. The metronome that keeps the city in time when people lose theirs. If this sounds like grievance, it's not. Grievance is a fist, the page is an instrument panel. I'm explaining the gauges. In families where love is indexed to performance, the child who keeps the machine working becomes an unacknowledged utility, useful until the light fails, praised for functioning, not for being. Dr. Monroe would later give me the words, conditional love, emotional invalidation, and I would write them down like coordinates. But even before vocabulary, I had the sensation that I was most visible when serving as a conduit for someone else's voltage. So I learned a second math alongside calculus, the arithmetic of agency. Input, hours logged, cents saved, lines of code that don't crash at 2 a.m. Output, a life that could survive without applause. Variables, weather, bus schedules, the mood of a manager who mistakes you for the Wi-Fi. Constraint, never ask someone who measures in returns to bankroll your start. Optimization target, peace. I didn't speak it then, but I think my body knew. Something in my shoulders unhitched when I focused on systems instead of speeches. The summer before college, the house smelled like travel dust. Suitcases unzipped and rezipped for Leah's trial run weeks in Paris. A kind of rehearsal for joy. I drove to the airport at 5 a.m., watched the sky lift its own blue curtain. When they disappeared past security, I sat with a styrofoam cup and my phone and mapped 3 new bus routes from the terminal to neighborhoods that didn't wake before noon. It was ridiculous, maybe, but it felt like prayer, design as devotion, a promise that time could be kinder if someone took it seriously. You could say the pattern was set by then. Leah, light. Alice, Ricker, silence. But patterns are not cages, they are cloth. You can cut new garments from old prints if you're willing to measure twice, and sew at odd hours. I wasn't brave yet. I was careful. I was building a record. Because when people leave holes, data fills them. And I intended to make a life you could not argue with, only read. The Paris dinner didn't end with a slammed door. It ended with a password. Back in my studio on Capitol Hill, I opened my laptop and made a new folder named Life Plan. Inside it, 3 blank files waited with the soft arrogance of clean paper. Savings, projects, roots. I didn't pray, I version controlled. I set a rule for myself and typed it at the top of each file like a heading, document everything. It surprised me how quiet deletion could be. I didn't rage scroll or write one more long message with the correct thesis and citations. I simply opened my contacts and flicked my mother's name away, then my father's, then the group chat with its frozen parade of clapping emojis. A clean line replaced their entries, an absence that looked like breath. I brewed coffee on the tiny stove, an old mocha pot that hissed like it had opinions, and watched rain stitch the window into long gray panels. Seattle is good at making you notice time. That night it clicked forward like a second hand you can finally hear, because the room is no longer talking over it. By day I went to the cafe 2 blocks down, an espresso and sourdough place with black tile and an owner who calibrated his grinders the way some people tune pianos. I poured shots, wiped the steam wand, refilled oat milk, and fixed the Wi-Fi when it fell asleep at the worst moments. A register freezing mid-payment, the playlist dying at the chorus, the online orders clogging in the pipe. There's a dignity to simple service when you choose it. There's a map, too. The morning rush, the lull, the second wave at 2, the last burst at 4 when the clouds roll in low like a promise. I kept my notebook under the counter, and when the boss wasn't looking, I diagrammed the network like it was a nervous system you could calm if you knew where it flinched. At night, I coded under a yellow desk lamp that warmed a cone of air and left the rest of the room perfectly undecided. I learned the neighborhood's sounds by pattern. A neighbor's toast always burning at 9. The upstairs faucet coughing at 10. The heater clicking awake like it was apologizing for being late. I taught myself to take small mercies seriously. And off by one bug, caught before midnight. A function refactored until it held its own posture. A unit test that passed clean on the first run. The difference between despair and momentum, I discovered, is sometimes as boring as a checklist. 3 weeks into this monastic rhythm, a DM landed in the forum I contributed to after midnight. Your route sorting snippet is elegant, it said, which felt like someone complimenting your handwriting in a world obsessed with billboards. We're a logistics startup downtown, Wayfinder Labs. Ever consult? The office sat in a building with glass walls and a lobby that smelled faintly of printer ink and venture capital. My badge said contract engineer, which is a phrase that still makes me smile. Contracts are just expectations written down, and I'm not afraid of anything that's written down. Day 1, I was assigned a desk near the back and an empty whiteboard that dared me to pretend at genius. I didn't. I took the afternoon to crawl through their codebase like you would inspect scaffolding, checking welds, measuring load, marking the places where an old assumption creaked. The team was 12 people who wore hoodies with different startup logos like passport stamps, product, ops, sales, 2 founders who alternated between visionary and very tired. By 6 p.m., the office thinned to the bones of the place, the hum of the HVAC, the soft blink of sleeping monitors, my own screen a country of light. I stayed. It was at 11:30 on a Tuesday that Arjun stopped at my desk, hands on his hips like he'd caught himself walking too fast. He had the head of engineering title and the posture of someone who knew how brittle prototypes get when ambition leans too hard. "You're optimizing delivery routes," he said, watching code slide past. "Side project." "Just choosing better pivots," I said. "Our cost function treats time like a flat rate. It isn't." He nodded. "Then don't treat it like one." He grinned like a test had been passed. "If it works, we'll pitch it." That became the deal. I'd cover tickets during the day, fix a misbehaving cache, tame an outage, translate between an anxious client and the system that wasn't trying to hurt them. And at night, I'd build a module that did what our deck promised we'd do someday. I called it Wayfinder in a private joke with myself. You can respect the ocean and still surf. I collected data like a cautious lover. Fuel logs, drop-off timestamps, driver notes about bad intersections where time disappears, weather reports, school zones that turn a straight line into a soft detour at 3 p.m. When people leave holes, data fills them. Cities leave holes. Families do too. Zoe, my roommate, a painter who worked mornings and had a laugh that sounded like someone dropping handfuls of marbles on a hardwood floor, would swing by the office with takeout when she knew I'd forget. "You're obsessed," she said, setting down a paper bag that smelled like garlic and inventory. "With distance," I said. "From what?" she asked, leaning on the cubicle divider. "From permission." She made a face that said she didn't like the word, then stole the last dumpling and left me to argue with the compiler. Therapy started because I had health insurance for the first time, and because my right eye twitched when I tried to sleep while the city's rain talked too loudly. Dr. Monroe had the kind of office that takes shame away from you at the door. Light wood, mint tea, the soft insistence of a clock that didn't tick. I told her the story the way you tell it, when you're trying not to sound petty. A dinner, a number, a sentence that behaved like a verdict. She didn't flinch. "Conditional love," she said, as if she were identifying an instrument in an orchestra. "Emotional invalidation," she added, and my shoulders recognized both phrases before my tongue did. "They rewarded you for being useful," she said softly, "which is not the same as being loved." "Then I'll own usefulness," I said. "I'll make it mine." "You already are," she said, nodding toward the folder of logs I brought to every session, like a pilgrim with proof of travel. Documenting is power when people gaslight outcome. Wayfinder moved from a folder to a whiteboard to a pilot. We launched with 3 small businesses, a coffee chain with 5 vans that used roots like superstition, a florist who lost money every Valentine's Day at precisely the same corner, and a bakery whose entire Thursday profit evaporated in the 15 minutes after school let out. I promised improvements I could measure. The florist got back 21 minutes across a morning. The bakery turned Thursday black ink, barely, which is a kind of miracle that no one cheers for in a hall, but which pays a rent on time. The coffee chain learned that 2 of their drivers were heroes, and 1 was a bottleneck, masquerading as a martyr. We lined the insights in 1 slide per client, no grand symphony, just notes played true. Arjun called it innovation. I called it proof. Proof is a moral category disguised as math. It doesn't care who you are, only whether the numbers behave. We pitched a spin-out. The founders said words like focus and moat and TAM, and I could feel my stomach clench in the old way, performance, image, return. But this time I stood in the picture. Papers were signed in a glass conference room overlooking Lake Union, rain walking down the windows in 100 parallel lines. My hand didn't shake. Co-founder and CTO sits differently than useful. It sat like a nameplate you can lay down at night and still keep your name. I didn't post about it. I bought a better laptop and put the old one in a drawer, like an artifact from a city I used to live in. At home, I cleaned my desk and taped the bus pass where I could see it without thinking. The green had faded to the color of a bruise that healed years ago. I took the torn note from the Paris night, "Call Mom," crossed out so hard the paper ripped, and filed it under archive, lessons. Control had begun to have a shape I could describe. Logs, receipts, dashboards that didn't lie. Not paranoia, architecture. The year turned in small chimes. Wayfinder grew from 2 desks that tried not to wobble, to a floor with carpet that tricked you into thinking you were quieter. We hired carefully and paid invoices on time. An angel investor didn't care about our swagger. He cared that our pilot data made stubbornly linear sense. We learned how to say no to misfit contracts and how to write yes in plain fonts the right people could read. My world shrank to sprints and widened to purpose in the same week. On Fridays, Zoe and I would walk home in that light rain that is less weather than hospitality. Sometimes she'd link her arm through mine and say, "You feel lighter." "Not lighter," I'd say. "Just finished." She'd squint like she didn't quite buy it and then let the subject go. One evening, late, I pulled open the drawer and held the old laptop on my knees. It was heavier than I remembered, the way past versions of yourself are. I thought of Henry tipping his cap, of the seat in the back row, of Leah's cream blazer and how good she looked in it, of Mom's perfume that always meant an announcement. "Families are systems too," I wrote in my journal. "If yours runs on returns, build a new one that runs on proof." I dated the page. I closed the book. Outside, the rain went steady as breathing. Paperwork is how dreams put on shoes. We spent a month turning a pilot into a plan you could hand to a lawyer. Cap table columns straight as train tracks. Vesting cliffs marked like weather fronts. A budget that knew the difference between hope and cash. In the glass conference room above Lake Union, rain walked down the windows in 100 silver lines, while Arjun slid the final page toward me. "Co-founder and CTO," he said, as if each letter were a rung. I signed without shaking. In families like mine, titles are often shadows thrown by someone else's light. This one felt like an object I could set on a desk and not apologize for. Wayfinder Labs got smaller and larger at once. Smaller because we said no to the contracts that wanted us to build dashboards for vanity. Larger because we chose the ones measured in fuel, miles, hours, given back to actual people. We hired like careful gardeners, slow, specific, no peacocks. Our first PM knew how to ask a grocery dispatcher questions in a voice that made the answers truer. Our first designer had a gift for making a plot speak without yelling. The engineer we stole from a fancier logo loved the smell of diesel and could read a trucker's logbook like a memoir. I wrote code and I wrote memos. The memos mattered, I learned, because code changes behavior and memos change beliefs. We are not optimizing for clicks, I wrote in a one-pager taped near the coffee machine. We are optimizing for mercy. Fewer wasted minutes in rain, fewer left turns across impossible traffic, fewer routes that swallow a paycheck. When a reporter called 6 months later asking about our innovative route intelligence, I almost laughed. Intelligence is a word that gets handed to platforms that shout their own name. What we had built was attention with a memory. The emissions cut model happened because of an argument nobody saw. A city official wanted proof that shaving turns and reshuffling windows into smarter sequences could do anything more than pad margins. "Show me the air," she said, which is exactly the type of challenge I respect. We built a calculator that translated route changes into gallons not burned, and then into air not harmed. It wasn't flashy. The math sat low to the ground and spoke in units that made sense if you filled your tank once a week and held your breath behind buses at red lights. The story landed on the local news, then a national blog. An angel investor sent a short email. "I like boring miracles. Coffee?" We took the meeting in a place where the napkins were too thick. He asked about our worst client and our best mistake. He asked how we would refuse the wrong kind of growth. He didn't ask for a promise we couldn't keep. We didn't offer one. Money followed data, not the other way around. We agreed to terms in a gray booth that smelled faintly of disinfectant and paninis. I walked back to the office in a drizzle that felt like the city approving in its modest way. At home, I didn't upgrade my wardrobe. I upgraded my laptop. I placed the old one, heavy, dented, loyal, in the drawer with the torn note that said, "Call Mom," and the green bus pass I'd pinned for years. I started a small ritual that felt private and sensible. On the first of every month, I would open a document called Archive, Lessons, and type 3 sentences. What I had believed too hard, what I hadn't believed enough, and what proved itself anyway. Dr. Monroe smiled when I told her. "Architects make blueprints before walls," she said. "You're learning to draft your life." The office moved from 12 people to 28, from a sublease that smelled like a printer to a floor that smelled like fresh carpet and nervous ambition. We instituted something we called Quiet Fridays, which meant no meetings after noon and no Slack messages that could be an email. People solve harder problems when you let them walk around them, I wrote in another memo. No one framed, but everyone honored. We learned where our tool broke. Snow, school release times, broken sensors on old vans, and wrote that truth into the docs so sales wouldn't sell miracles we couldn't deliver. Years blur when your calendar is sane. We shipped, we fixed, we slept. Arjun started keeping a small plant alive. The front desk bowl finally had pens that worked. I developed a habit of leaving my desk clean as a sheet of ice. Only a laptop, a coaster, a pen aligned with the edge. Control, I realized, had a shape when you made it. It wasn't paranoia. It was architecture. Logs instead of arguments. Receipts instead of regret. Dashboards that told you which part of the day deserved your best brain. On a Tuesday that would have passed like any other, my phone pinged with a real estate app I had forgotten to uninstall. New listing in Medina, it announced, and I clicked out of reflex. The photos looked like a promise said softly. Glass and cedar, water opening like a sentence that doesn't have to hurry. Rooms that seemed to exhale. The price tag sat there with its impossible posture, $5 million, a number that once lived in the same drawer as fairy tales and other people's lives. I closed the app. I opened it again. I didn't call anyone. The inspection smelled like wet wood and optimism. The agent tried to sell me on the kitchen, but I was listening to the way the house held sound. Each room had a resting heartbeat. In the living room, the lake made a hush you can't purchase in any other way. In the office, the walls seemed to say, "If you speak softly, we will carry it far." The numbers made sense. Numbers that made sense had been my most faithful companions. I signed, no co-signers, no permission papers disguised as help, no other names on the line. Moving day was rain and cedar and a washing machine humming off in some grateful corner. I set down my 2 boxes of books, my 2 plants, my 1 good lamp, and stood in the center of what felt like a clear page. Then I opened the box labeled Archive. I lifted the green bus pass, smoothed it in its frame, and hung it on the office wall at eye level. Beneath it, I wrote in small print the sentence I had once scribbled above a desk in a room that smelled like burnt toast, broken roots, better paths. The first night in the house, I walked barefoot across the wide plank floors and tested the way light moved. The lake wore silver like a calm animal. My reflection in the glass looked faint and sure at once, a person stepping out of fog. Silence didn't equal absence anymore. It equaled presence without performance. I brewed coffee just to see the steam curl in a space that would keep it company. I turned off lights one by one, the way a city quiets its neighborhoods. I thought of my parents, but not like an injury. More like a solved equation I had the notes for. Were they still measuring worth by applause and returns? Did they tell the story of Leah's Paris fund as a parable at dinner parties, the way some families pass down recipes? Did anyone ask them about the child who chose the bus seat at the back because it let her think? Who printed her own congratulations because no one else would? The questions rose and drifted like fog that couldn't decide whether to stay. I let them pass. In the morning, the house had a new smell, the warmed dust of a heating system that hadn't woken this early in a long time. I made a list on the counter with a pen that loved the paper. Power bill, trash day, router placement, a note to order blinds. The ordinary is the most sacred when you build it yourself. Ethan came over with croissants and a look that said he had walked very slowly to enjoy the street. "You did it," he said, and I nodded, because both of us knew the better sentence was quieter. I made a life measured in something other than permission. People think vindication is a trumpet. It's closer to a level tool, a bubble settling in the middle when the shelf is right. I hung a single photograph, Lake Union that day we signed, crooked on purpose, then fixed it. I opened my laptop and set a simple dashboard that tracked nothing anyone would brag about publicly. Sleep hours, walks along the water, how often I cooked. Proof does not have to be dramatic to change the air. Control is a room that holds you without making demands. That night, as rain began its patient translation on the glass, I sat in the office and looked up at the bus pass. The green had faded further, a soft bruise now turned to memory. On the shelf below it, the old laptop rested like a river rock. I pulled my journal close and wrote, "They taught me love was earned. I learned peace does not ask." I closed the cover and listened. The house didn't answer. It didn't have to. It was busy keeping me. The first rupture had been a dinner. The second came as a ring. Saturday sun was turning the living room floor into bright horizontal coins. When my phone flashed an unfamiliar number, local area code, the kind that could be a delivery driver or a wrong digit. I almost let it pass, almost. Instinct can be a strange archivist. It remembers the sound of doors you once forgot to lock. I swiped. "Alice," a voice said, already trembling. "It's me. Leah." For a moment, I only saw the light move on the floor, slow as the minute hand of a patient clock. "I just drove past Medina," she blurted, words breaking into pieces. "Your name is on the gate. Do you really live there?" Outside, the sprinklers clicked with the regularity of sensible machines. "What are you really asking, Leah?" I said softly. There was a breath, then a small, sharp exhale. "Why do you have that?" The line went dead. Silence filled the room, like water poured carefully to the rim. I stared at the phone until my face ghosted onto the black glass. Then the flood began. Voicemails stacked like plates. Texts arrived as if someone had found a switch marked family and threw it. My mother's voice came first. the one she used for committees and celebratory toasts, polished as a banister. "Darling, call us. Your sister said something unbelievable. You can't let jealousy divide this family." The word family bore the weight of a key, used only when a lock needs to turn. My father's message followed, measured, low. "Alice, it's your father. Let's talk as adults." In our house, adulthood was a tone, not a milestone. "We're still family," he added, the syllables arranged like receipts. The courier arrived near dusk, his jacket damp, the envelope cream and heavy enough to pretend to be good news. Inside, my mother's handwriting, elegant with edges. "Leah is expecting," it began, a softness embedded like a pad beneath a blade. "You'll be an aunt. Perhaps it's time to heal." The next paragraph balanced the ledger she never admitted to keeping. "Your father's work is complicated this season. The roof needs replacing. Family supports each other." The final line landed exactly as intended. "I know you're not a cold person." People who catalog your usefulness also curate your tenderness. They try to sign it out like a library book when their own shelf is bare. I didn't cry. I brewed tea. I opened the folder named Therapy and scrolled until I found the page labeled Boundaries. Then I wrote a new line in a margin that had forgotten it could grow. "They don't miss me. They miss the role I used to play." Roles are instruments. If you stop playing, someone will shake the case and demand a song. You can love them and still refuse to hand over the bow. 3 days later, I mailed 2 letters with stamps, chosen for the unremarkable dignity of their design. The first was to my mother. "If contact is to continue," I wrote, 3 conditions: no money, no guilt, no surprise visits. I'm not asking for apologies, I'm asking for space. The second to my father was shorter. "You once called it investment and returns," I wrote. "Here's mine, freedom. Let's close the account properly." There's a strange kindness in not pretending a ledger is something else. It lets the conversation stand on the floor it has always used. His reply arrived as a text that did not emote. "Fremont, Thursday, 10 U." The cafe near the bridge smelled like rain and coffee, roasted by people who talk about beans like geography. He was on time, coat pressed, hair grayer, the sort of tired that begins in the mouth and moves outward. He touched the chair back as if obtaining permission to sit. "You look different," he said. "Better or worse?" I asked. "Different," he said again, searching my face for his old story. I waited for the script, the one that begins with a long sigh and then strolls into "We did what we could." He didn't make me wait long. "We did what we could," he said, fingers circling the cup without lifting it. "Parents make mistakes." "It wasn't a mistake," I said, meeting his eyes, thankful for the steadiness that therapy and logs and consistency burrowed into my voice. "It was math," he blinked. "Math." "You invested $80,000 in image," I said gently. "I built value out of nothing. The difference is honesty." I didn't say cruelty. I didn't say neglect. Those words draw heat when you need light. Honesty is colder, cleaner. It shows you the ledger without rubbing your face in it. He stared at the coffee as its steam thinned into nothing, and finally said the quietest sentence I had ever heard from him. "We thought it would return." In finance and in families, return is the dream you shake until it pretends to be certain. "I don't need you to pay me back," I said. "That's the point." He nodded once, the smallest tilt, like a pen, checking a box it never liked. We sat with the geometry of it, the triangle of table, 2 cups, the bridge arm cutting the window with its steel. Rain stitched the glass into vertical lines that matched our distance perfectly. If Vindication had an orchestra, this is where the violins would swell. In life, there is only the sound of ceramic on saucer and a chair quietly pushed back. He reached for a last argument, then let it die in his throat. "Your mother," he began. I spared him the sentence. "This isn't about punishment," I said. "It's about boundaries." He frowned in that familiar managerial way that meant negotiation. I shook my head. "Not bargaining, architecture. I built a life that doesn't run on your approvals. That's not a threat. It's a design choice." We stood. We did not hug. At the door, I said the words I needed to leave in the air so I wouldn't carry them. "I hope your roof gets fixed." He nodded. There are mercies so small, no one can argue with them. News travels in families like weather in maritime towns. Low, constant, salty at the edges. By the time the gala invitation arrived, I had heard through a cousin's carefully casual message that Mom was telling people that I'd finally found confidence, an adjective that behaves like a compliment while patting you on the head. I put the envelope in a drawer, then took it out. The Seattle Education fundraiser had always been the kind of evening my mother loved. Airbrush speeches, checks large enough to behave like mirrors, lights soft enough to flatter decisions. Wayfinder was sponsoring a new STEM scholarship that night, and the host asked me to say a few words. Ethan found me reading in the office, the bus pass column on the wall above. "You don't have to," he said. "I know." I closed the book. But there's a specific sentence I need to say into a microphone. The room glittered in a way I had once mistaken for value. Mom's pearls appeared before I could decide whether to look up first or last. Leah's dress was the tender blue of the first 10 minutes of dawn. Pregnancy softened the angles of her face, and something inside me softened too, in spite of everything, not toward the machine that measured us, but toward the person who had been measured all her life. "We came to congratulate you," my mother said, in a tone that folded sugar into steel. "You've done so well, and of course," she added, as if conjuring a neighborly errand. "Success means giving back. Your father's roof, and Leah's preparing for the baby." "Excuse me," I said, and turned to the host. A stage assistant handed me the envelope I had arranged quietly that afternoon. The microphone felt cool. How polite metal is compared to human expectation. "Tonight," I said, steady and small, "I'd like to make a personal contribution. $80,000 for scholarships for young women who were told they don't deserve help." The number hung in the air, exact and deliberate. Applause began soft, then rolled. I looked at my mother the way you look at a painting you finally understand. It was always about the frame. "You once called it an investment," I said for her ears alone. "So do I." Dad froze mid-step, as if someone had called his name in a language he wasn't fluent in anymore. The check glowed under the lights, not as a performance but as proof, a ledger righted, a sentence rewritten. I walked off stage and into the Seattle night, where rain was performing its long, patient translation of air into water. I didn't post a photo. I didn't write a caption. Silence can be authorship, too. The next morning, mist sat low on the lake like a cat that has chosen your lap. Ethan brewed coffee. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how simple the syllable felt in my mouth. "Finally," he smiled. "You looked lighter up there." "Not lighter," I said, touching the bus pass with one finger. "Finished." In the office, I opened my journal and wrote the final line of a note I had been drafting for years. They taught me love must be earned. I learned peace does not ask. Phones went quiet. The house held its temperature. The heron skimmed the waterline, businesslike and holy. I returned to my desk and to the version of family I chose, the one made from colleagues who keep their promises, from friends who bring soup without posting about it, from a man who leaves room on the counter for whatever I'm building. When you stop playing a role, some rooms stop clapping. That's fine. You build your own acoustics. You let silence carry your name farther than speeches ever did. The thing about applause is that it fades faster than a kettle boils. By noon the day after the gala, the emails had cooled to a manageable room temperature. Thank yous from the fund, 3 requests for interviews I ignored, and 1 precise message from a high school counselor in Rainier Valley. Your $80,000 will cover 8 girls' first hard barrier. We'll send you names when they agree. Most won't want photos. I typed back, no photos, just receipts. And if any of them want to call about bus routes, coding, or setting boundaries with people who love conditions, I'll make time. I didn't check my parents' feeds. I didn't look for a narrative to interrupt. If my mother told the story as proof of my growth, so be it. Some people can lay their hand flat on a hot stove and call it a lesson. I let the air clear. I answered my actual life. At Wayfinder, we put the scholarship in a 1-paragraph internal note. No exclamation points, just the sentence. We chose to widen the road for others. The team nodded in that quiet way that has kept us honest. Arjun brought in cheap cupcakes with tiny silver sprinkles and set them on the kitchenette counter under the sign that says, "Please wash your mug." A modest celebratory geometry. "You okay?" he asked, the way old friends ask when they know okay is not always what it means. "I am," I said. "And I'm late for Dash Review." He grinned. "Perfect." I walked the floor and listened the way I always do when I'm restless, looking for the snag in a process, the frayed place in a day. Our emissions calculator had gone out of date on a regional fleet because a sensor lied 3 times in a row. We wrote the lie into the model so it could subtract itself. A dispatcher called to say a school zone had changed its hours. We pushed a patch that taught our routes to memorize a bell schedule. People think software is a set of commands. It's actually a set of courtesies you teach machines to keep on your behalf. I sent a memo titled "Don't Argue with Asphalt" and went home feeling that specific peace you get when you can point quietly to something you fixed. Ethan met me at the door with a look I'd come to love, soft amusement edged with respect, as if he were greeting a weather front. He had rearranged the kitchen the way people rearrange languages, sink first, then nouns. Bowls within reach. I opened the fridge and saw he'd labeled the leftovers with dates. "You're becoming me," I said. He kissed my forehead. "I prefer to think you are contagious." We ate vegetables and a stupidly good roast chicken at the counter, and when he reached for my hand, I felt the old reflex, brace for the ask, rise up and dissolve. He didn't want a statement or a family hearing or my spare oxygen. He wanted to know if I wanted a walk. We took the long curve along the lake, where the heron likes to stand and look at itself like a monk who has swapped a mirror for water. The sky sat low. The air tasted like the inside of a stone. "Did you ever think it would look like this?" Ethan asked. "This?" I said, and waved a hand at the lake, the cedar, the stubborn, ordinary beauty. "No, I thought I'd build an apartment that didn't smell like someone else's toast." He laughed. "And instead you built a room that smells like cedar and peace." "I built a ledger I can live with," I said. "Everything else is decor." The first scholarship name arrived 2 days later. Marisol, age 17, Garfield High. She wanted to study environmental engineering because my little brother's asthma makes me count the buses. The counselor attached a scan of a hand-drawn map, her block, the school, the 3 worst intersections, the time of day notes she'd kept since she was 12. I printed it and pinned it in my office under the bus pass. Proof, not for the world, for the girl who would become the woman who would make air lighter for kids she hadn't met yet. The second name was Amaya, from a family that had pinned every hope into ballet until an ankle snapped. "I'm better at numbers," she wrote, "and numbers don't rupture." The third was Abby, who had taught herself Python on a borrowed library computer that logged her out every 30 minutes. "My dad says if you want help, earn it," she wrote, "but the library closes at 6. I sat with those lines for a long time, how the sentences carried weight without drama, how they sounded like the inside voice of a life you respect. I sent each of them a letter that did not condescend. "You don't owe me gratitude," I wrote. "What I hope is that you waste less time dodging other people's traffic. If you ever need to borrow a boundary, I have spares." Then, beneath my name, I added the sentence Dr. Monroe once gave me, like a spare key. "You are not a utility, you are a person." Dr. Monroe, when I told her about the gala and the letters, poured tea and waited. She practices silence like medicine. Dose, watch, respond. "How do you feel?" she asked, the way only therapists can ask without turning the words into a performance. "Finished," I said again, and felt the word settle into a chair. "Not vindicated?" she asked, curious. "No," I said. "Vindication implies a jury. I fired the jury." She smiled. "Then what?" "Accounting," I said. "The numbers make sense." The next call I didn't expect came from Leah. Not a breathless front gate shock, but a small human voice left on my voicemail at 7:21 a.m. The time of day you can measure someone by. "Hi," she said. "This is not about the house." A pause. I saw the scholarship news on the fund's site. Another pause. I remember the bus pass. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone warm in my hand, and did something I would not have believed I could do 5 years earlier. I let the message exist without solving it. I made coffee. I answered my work email. I did not call back right away. When I did, I walked the house while we spoke, so my feet could move if my blood tried to sprint. Leah talked about nausea and baby names, and how Paris was beautiful but loud. How being loved loud didn't always feel like being heard. She said the word proud 3 times, like she was testing if it could mean I see you instead of I approve of your outcome. I didn't offer absolution. I didn't rewind our childhood and press play. I said, if you want to bring the baby over, tell me and I'll put on water for tea. And then, because truth is a boundary too, I added, "But if the invitation is actually Mom's, don't." She blew out a breath that sounded like a long car ride finding its exit. "It's mine," she said. "Good," I said. "Then it's welcome." The baby came months later, not part 6, but the life that keeps writing itself beyond all our outlines. She was warm and unremarkable in the holy way all babies are, asleep on my chest, while Leah watched my face as if reading a language no one had taught her. Ethan made soup and stayed demurely in the kitchen like a saint of the pot. Mom and Dad did not come that day. They would come later, or they wouldn't, and either way the house would hold. On a Tuesday in late spring, Wayfinder pushed the biggest update we'd attempted, a recalibration that made our roots move like water around new construction instead of fighting it like stubbornness. We called it flow and refused the temptation to say AI in neon. The patch notes were as simple as we could make them. Less wasted time, fewer angry drivers, better air. A reporter tried for the 4th time to get me to say disruption. "We're not disrupting," I said. We're mending." He didn't print the line which told me I had said the right thing. That night, rain came in tidy sheets, each one laid onto the lake, with the care of a nurse adjusting a blanket. I stood by the glass and listened to my favorite sound, the steady non-argument of water with itself. On the wall, the bus pass watched over the names of the new scholarship cohort. Marisol, Amaya, Abby, 2 more to be confirmed, and 3 blank lines meant for the future. Beneath them, 1 sentence in my careful hand. "Build rooms where no one has to audition to belong." Ethan turned off the last light in the kitchen. "You're smiling," he said. "Am I?" I answered. He nodded. "You look like someone who picked up a heavy thing and finally put it down. Not because you had to, because you decided to." I rested my forehead against the cool pane and watched the heron stab at the shallow edge, intent and patient. "The heavy thing wasn't my family," I said. "It was the belief that they were my scale." He kissed the place between my eyebrows, a small press that said, "I see the calculation and the person who did it." We went to bed early, a kind of wealth that doesn't ask permission. I slept without the twitch in my right eye, and when I woke before dawn, I wrote 3 new lines in archive. Lessons. What I believed too hard, that love and investment are twins. What I didn't believe enough, that silence could be shelter. What proved itself anyway, there is no jury. There's only your ledger, your breath, your rain. I closed the journal and set it under the bus pass, as if the past could press the page flatter. Outside, the lake shifted under a wind you couldn't see, then stilled. Somewhere, a teenager printed her own certificate on a library machine with a paper jam sign flapping uselessly to one side. Somewhere, a dispatcher opened our dashboard and exhaled when a route finally made sense. Somewhere, a father sighed and looked at his roof and decided whether to pay a bill on time. The world kept its arithmetic. I kept mine. In every city, there's a sound that teaches you how to end. In Seattle, it's the long, even hush of rain deciding not to argue with glass. On the mornings I wake early, I make coffee without drama and stand at the window while the lake rehearses its silver. The bus pass hangs above my desk with a patience I once mistook for waiting. Now I understand it as witness. It watched me learn a new arithmetic, one that does not ask a jury for their verdict. It watched me take a ledger, written by other hands, and write my own columns until the numbers made a home. People sometimes ask what changed first: the house, the job, the boundary, the scholarship, the speech. None of those. What changed first was the angle of the page. I stopped recording to convince and started recording to build. I stopped treating silence like punishment and started treating it like structure. Document everything, I wrote once at the top of a file, and it turned out I was writing a life, not a checklist. When I think of Leah now, it isn't the chandelier night that arrives first. It's a morning months after the gala when she walked up my path with a stroller and a diaper bag that looked like it had survived a soft war. She paused at the threshold the way you pause at a museum, not to be reverent, but to agree to new rules of attention. "She's asleep," Leah whispered, peeling back a corner of blanket, as if revealing a password. The baby's cheeks were the exact color of proof you don't have to show to anyone. I made tea and we sat in the living room without performing, the house practicing its trick of holding two women who had grown up in the same machine and learned different languages to get out. "I remember Henry," Leah said after a while, unexpected as the heron when it chooses a new spot on the shore. "He used to tip his cap even when he was late." I nodded, surprised at what warmed in my chest. Not forgiveness, something simpler, more technical. Recognition across a long commute. "I thought I was the only one who noticed," I said. Leah laughed softly. "You were always noticing. I was always being noticed." The sentence sat between us like an instrument we could both finally name. There were still slips. A text from Mom with a photo of shingles and the caption, "Worrisome." A voicemail from Dad with an old habit in the throat, the one that turns requests into orders. "Call me back." I didn't. I sent the roofer's number to Leah instead and a short message. "Only if you want this to be yours." She replied with a thumbs up and later a photo of the baby, grabbing a corner of the bus pass frame as if to say, "We inherit at random and then choose on purpose." At Wayfinder, we kept choosing boring miracles. We named things the way you'd label jars in a pantry and refused to perform genius. Flow matured into something quieter, fewer idling minutes near schools, fewer ugly left turns at cursed intersections, fewer drivers white-knuckling through the last hour of their shift because a city forgot they were people. We shipped a feature that turned every delay into a short, readably honest note, rather than an error code designed to make someone feel dumb. We lost a contract to a louder competitor and regained 3 because our portal looked like respect. In review season, I wrote the same sentence across a dozen forms. Your attention changes air. It was true. The scholarship cohort mailed me hand-drawn maps and screen grabs, and once, a photo of a library checkout slip with 4 renewals circled. Marisol sent a video of a science fair where she had rigged a cheap air quality sensor to a scooter and measured disbelief into lines you could not argue with. Amaya sent a 3-sentence email that read like a poem. Numbers don't rupture, feet heal, I am learning both. Abby sent nothing except grades, which I printed and pinned beneath the bus pass in a row that pleased the part of me that trusts paper more than applause. When they wrote thank yous, I wrote back the same thing, adjusted for detail. No photos, just receipts. Spend your calm on the work. In therapy, Dr. Monroe asked, not unkindly, what I would do with the space that peace had created. The question surprised me. I had trained for survival, not leisure. Sleep, I said first, and we both smiled. Walk, I added. Build rooms that don't require auditions. She nodded. And what about love? I looked out the window at a slice of sky, flat as a page. I'm practicing thinking of love as a room with good light, I said, not a performance review. She wrote something, then looked up. And how's Ethan's cooking? I laughed. Meddling, I said. Tender, I added. Adequately salted. She lifted her cup like a toast. Adequately salted is an underappreciated miracle. On some afternoons, the house fills with people in ways that my younger self would have called a party, and my current self calls a table. The team comes by with bad jokes and good bread. Zoe hangs a painting that refuses to be quiet. Ethan chops herbs with the concentration of someone reading a prayer. We don't discuss investment or return. We discuss the trucker who started drinking water because our app's break reminders convinced him his body was a schedule worth keeping. We discuss a dispatcher who confessed she sleeps easier. We discuss a route across town that learned to carry its own weight. We say the word mercy without embarrassment and mean it. I still keep the archive, lessons. The sentences got plainer as my life did. Last week I wrote, what I believed too hard, that endings need witnesses. What I didn't believe enough, that calm is a skill. What proved itself anyway? When you stop auditioning, rooms improve. Beneath it, I added a line in small print. A superstition I indulge because it feels like a blessing. Build a ledger you can live with, and the rain will read it to you when you're tired. To you watching, maybe in a kitchen, while someone opens and closes cabinets too hard. Maybe in a bedroom that still smells like someone else's burnt toast. Maybe on a bus with seats warmer in the back. Here is what I can give that isn't advice, because you are the only one qualified for your math. Some families run on image, some on applause, some on the quiet usefulness of children who will be praised for functioning until they forget how to be. If you were told you don't deserve help, someone taught you a vocabulary that would starve you if you let it. You can learn a new language. Distance is a verb. Silence is a tool. Boundaries are not walls. They are architecture. Start a folder called Life Plan, or call it anything but Call Me Back. Document everything. Not to win an argument with people who grade your breathing, but to build something you can rest in. And if you can bear one more sentence, let it be this. You are not a utility. You are a person. Not a ledger, not a return. A person who gets to choose which rooms deserve your time and which chairs you will not pull close anymore. If you walk away, you are not failing a test. You are choosing a scale that doesn't lie to you. Thank you for walking this far with me. Thank you for letting rain be a character and a teacher. I wish you health sturdy enough to ignore bad weather and happiness that doesn't need a microphone. I wish your family, however you define it, the courage to choose architectures that do not require auditions. If this story sat with you a while and kept you company, I'm grateful. If you want more like it, subscribe so the next one finds you without having to shout. And tell me where you're watching from, if you'd like, not for data, but because it comforts me to know how far quiet can travel. The lake hushes, the heron lifts, the bus pass watches. Somewhere, A teenager is printing her own certificate under a library sign complaining about paper jams. Somewhere, a dispatcher breathes easier. Somewhere, you are counting differently. That is enough.